Chapter 6. As they came out of the building and stepped onto the street, Gustavo asked, "Where are we exactly?" He turned to Chippewa. "Oh yes, I'm sorry I didn't say. We are in Boca Raton. Isn't that right, Dan?" "Yes, that's where I worked, yes." "What about Key West then? What about Fabio? Did he come back from his holidays?" "Oh yes, he did," Dan replied. "And we got the job at Seagate, but I'm the only one who worked in this place." He jutted his chin toward the medical clinic they had just left. "Okay, where to now?" Gustavo asked Chippewa. "Well, why don't we go to the cafe across the street and get a coffee or something?" "As long as I get to Seagate before 6, I'm game," Dan said, nodding. As they sat at a table in the little establishment, Gustavo asked, "What about the apartment? If we're in Boca Raton right now, what happened to the apartment in Key West? Did you ever live there?" He switched his gaze from Dan to Chippewa. Or was that another prank from Damianos? No, but Key West was only temporary while we were all looking to become officers. After we decided not to join the Navy, Fabio and I took the job with Seagate, Dan replied. "Those are the details, Gustavo," Chippewa said. "Suffice to say that Dan here, when he was first hired at Seagate, he didn't have enough money to rent an apartment anywhere. That's why he bunked into the janitor's room for the clinic." "And when did you get an apartment then?" Gustavo asked Dan. "A while after I'd been hired at Seagate. I didn't spend anything on anything except food for a while, and when I had enough money to put a deposit down on an apartment with 2 other guys, I moved from the clinic." "Was it a big place?" "Oh, no, Gustavo, but we each had a room to ourselves, and it was clean. That's all we wanted, really." "What about the cars you restored?" "Oh, that happened when I was in college. Like the Porsche you saw when Solanke and Damon paid us a visit. That was one of the first cars I restored to help with college expenses. But restoring old cars was always a passion of mine." "Was it a big place?" "Oh no, Gustavo. After Key West, Fabio and I never moved back together, and the 2 roommates I had, they never worked at Seagate. We met at college. After I graduated, they continued there. They graduated about 2 years after we started to be roommates. Their names were John and Dante. His nickname was Chiquiling, shorty in Spanish, so his nickname was the opposite of what he really was. Chiquiling from the Dominican Republic, and when I was in college, I would go there to visit and race dirt bikes with him, and spend endless times at the beach while he drank Tanqueray and tonic. His family was very close to me, his 2 brothers and parents. Whenever I visited, they always went out of their way to show me around. John, my other roommate, was also a good friend, but after we graduated, we never saw each other again." As Daniel got up from the church pew, he went up the centre aisle and looked at the apse, an altar that seemed to call him to come forward. He couldn't remember the last time he felt so overwhelmed. He thought God himself was going to appear to him any minute now. The silence was overpowering. As he reached the steps in front of the altar, he knelt down and looked up at the cross and stained-glass window behind it. He wanted to speak, but the words were caught in his throat. "Why am I here?" he finally asked in a whisper. "You are here and somewhere you should not be, Daniel," a familiar voice replied. At these words, Daniel lifted his head. The ghostly figure that appeared before him seemed to float above ground. Dressed in his shepherd cloak and holding his cane beside him, Damiano said, "You are lost in time, son. You should not have gone astray, but since you did, and you are now like a lost lamb from my flock." "It's good seeing you again, Damianos," Daniel said, lowering his gaze to the step beneath his knees. "I'm sorry, but I didn't know going for a swim would land me in so much trouble." "I know, and you are not entirely to blame. I should have told you to stay aboard the cruiser. Or if you wanted to go anywhere, I should have accompanied you." "But what about the time we went on that deserted island? You weren't with us then," Daniel argued softly. "Yes, yet you stayed aboard the cruiser and together with your mother and siblings, besides which I had planned this little sortie for you. As I told you at the time, I wanted you to face problems on your own, a sort of test if you like." "Yes, I know you said that, Damianos, but now this is a little more fighting jungle beasties all trying to find a way out of an overgrown forest, isn't it?" "True, however, and now that you know where, and more importantly the date at which you have landed, I think you should prepare yourself to face your future." "That would be okay if I remembered what I was doing when I was 13, Daniel said. "I don't know what I did at that time besides going to school and playing games or going bike riding with Dad and Stefano." "That's right, Daniel, and presently I will give you the opportunity to travel to places." "I don't want to travel anywhere, Damianos," Daniel objected firmly, getting to his feet. "I want to go back to 1988 and find Dad." "That will not be possible, son. Remember, you were not born in 1988, and your father is gone from Key West now. He's travelling through time at this moment in the hope of finding you." "What about Mum, Gabby and Stefano? Are they coming to find me too?" "Yes, Daniel. However, they will soon find out that retracing one's footsteps through time is not an easy task." "What about me, then? Should I stay here with the Gomez family?" "No, Daniel. By now, they will have forgotten they ever met you." "Why did you do that, Damianos? They were the only people who believed my story and they could have helped me." "And how do you think they would have helped you, Daniel? The only one who can and will help you now is God himself." "What about you? Wouldn't you be able to take me back to my mother like you did when you took me and Gustavo to Iran? That happened before I was born, didn't it?" "Yes, Daniel, but to answer your earlier question as to whether I could help you, the answer is no. I cannot do anything for you at this time. God wants you to find your way home, at least until your father is able to join you." "How can I live alone?" Daniel asked, feeling as if someone had slapped him in the face. "Is that a punishment?" "Take it any way you want, son, but God will be your only guide from now on end." And with these words the shepherd disappeared, leaving Daniel to his lonesome. Even being 20 years of age now, he felt as lost as a little boy searching for his mum and dad in a strange place. He turned around and walked slowly out of the church. The street was almost deserted. This being Sunday, as he recalled, there were only a few passers-by and a few cars on the road. The sun was hot and the nearby beach seemed to call for him. Daniel wondered how he was going to survive. He had practically no money, only a couple of dollars in his wallet, and no job to go to or no home to return to. He looked around him and wondered what his father would have done in his place. He didn't have any skills he could use. Admittedly, he had graduated from high school. But then what? When Damianos reappeared in the cruiser, Malou smiled up to him. "How did you sleep?" she asked, getting up from the chair at the kitchen table. "Do you want to eat something?" Damianos looked at her curiously. Something in Malou's attitude had changed. "I could do with something, yes," he replied, still standing near the bottom step. "Okay then," Malou said. "Why don't you have a seat and I'll get some sausages and fry an egg for you. Do you want some coffee?" "No thanks, Malou. Sausage and an egg will do just fine." Damianos went to sit at the table. "So how was your night?" Gabby asked cheerfully. "Did you go fishing or something? Maybe you went to the back of the fish market." Stefano added, grinning. "All right, people, what's going on here? What is this all about? I like flatteries and nice food like any other cat." "Not like any other cat, Damianos," Gabby interposed. "We know all about you now. No more secrets. You've been hiding things from us, haven't you?" Damianos was taken aback, to say the least. "I don't recall having kept any secrets from you, have I?" He turned to Malou, who was busy preparing their cat's breakfast. "Just a detail," she replied, turning to face him. "It has to do with swaddling clothes. Do you recall now?" Damianos' jaw dropped. "Who told you this?" "Never mind who told me, Damianos, but the point is that none of us was aware of your relationship with Mary, Mother of God, and until now we didn't understand the purpose of your assignment. We didn't understand any of it. Because right from the start you always showed us your devilish and playful side. You kept your compassionate nature well hidden under a coat of black fur, whereas you're really a tabby cat that loves and protects people from harm, true?" Damiano shook his head and returned to look at Stefano and Gabby. "I didn't want you to find out," he said almost inaudibly. "Why not?" Stefano asked. "It would have been so different if we had known who you really were. Do you know that?" "I have not been assigned to this task by accident, Stefano." "We know that too," Gabby interjected, "and it doesn't explain why you had to hide your true identity from us." "Well, let me explain something to you," Damiano said as Malou deposited a plate with sausages and egg and a fork in front of him. He raised his eyes to her. "Thank you, Malou. That will be lovely." "So what's the explanation?" Stefano asked. "That when I started to live in Pahokee with the old Seminole Indian, God didn't want me to appear as I am. He wanted people who decided to visit their past to understand that obedience was the underlying precept to their enterprises. Traveling to one's past demands adherence to ancient rules, which rules have been carried through time by the Seminoles living in South Florida. And a tabby cat, although blessed, wasn't endowed of the faculties required to guide people through and down to their past." "Is that why you always showed the tomcat side of yourself?" Malou asked. "Yes, Malou, a tomcat is a determined and somewhat devious creature, but it is also a creature that is as stubborn as they come. He will guide you out of the trickiest of predicaments and will lead you back on the right path if he sees that you flinch in your desire to accomplish your goals in life." "Isn't he also a playful cat?" Gabby asked. "Absolutely. He loves to play games and to unnerve the most sober of people, but deep down all cats have one trait in common." "What's that?" Stefano asked. Damianos began eating before he answered. After swallowing a mouthful of sausage, he said, "That's the fact that a cat does not belong to anyone. He chooses where he wants to live. He chooses how he wants to lead his life. He will not wag his tail when you come home. He will not eat what he does not like." He looked at Malou, who had regained a seat beside their cat. "And this breakfast is absolutely delicious, Malou. Thank you." "So you're saying cats are their own individuals, is that right?" Yes, Gabby, and whether I am a tabby cat or I take on the personality of a tomcat does not matter as much as what God wants me to do in any given circumstances. But you said that you didn't have a master. No, I didn't say that, Gabby. I said that I don't belong to anybody, which is different. Yet you're right in so far as God is my master and the master of all that he created. Well, we're happy to know who you are, Damianos, Malou said, and whether you're the shepherd, the tabby cat with an M on his forehead, or the tomcat that we all know so well, you are due respect and understanding. Thank you, Malou. It feels good to hear these words. They remained silent for a moment, watching Damianos eat with obvious appetite. Then the shepherd said, I've seen Daniel. You have? Malou exclaimed. Where is he? Can we go to him? Damianos shook his head as he ate the last bite of sausage. No, Malou, that will not be possible. Why not? She demanded, her frustration returning at a gallop. He will wait for you, and that until the whole family has returned to the time at which he has landed. But why? Stefano repeated before his mother did. Because God wants him to learn to survive on his own. Your son needs to take care of himself. He needs to learn to take the reins and manage his life. Why would God want him to do that? What's his plan? Gabby asked. I am sorry, my dear, but I am not privy to God's plan in this instance. However, I can only repeat to you that God is all knowledge, and if he has decided that it will be the best course of action for Daniel to be on his own, we'll have to accept his decision. Malou's eyes clouded with tears. He's too young. Come on, Mum, Stefano interposed. How old do you think he is? I know how old he is, Stefano, but he doesn't know anything about living on his own. And perhaps it's about time he learned to do just that, Stefano said. And then what? Malou objected, visibly angry by now. He's got no money, no one to turn to, no friends to help. And that, I think, is the purpose of this exercise, Malou, Damianos interposed gently. As much as he needed to learn that there were no war games, that war kills innocent people, as much as he needs to learn what life can and will offer him, if he puts his mind to it. So you think God is teaching him a lesson? Gabby asked. Perhaps he is, yes. But again, I have no knowledge of what the end purpose of the exercise is.